In today's program, we'll talk about 3 scientific ways to get in touch with the powers of your mind: hypnosis, biofeedback, and subliminal perception. Hypnosis has nothing to do with sleep. In sleep, the outside world is cut off, whereas in hypnosis, not only can the subject perform all his usual daily activities, but he will also answer the hypnotizer's questions. Freud used hypnosis in his early practice. He realized that painful memories chased from the conscious mind could be recalled more easily by patients under hypnosis. Today, hypnosis can be a useful tool in a variety of situations. Unlike many people who are terrified by a visit to their dentist, this child seems quite relaxed. She shows no fear when the drill approaches her mouth, nor does she feel any pain when the dentist repairs the cavity in her tooth. She is completely concentrated on petting the imaginary cat in her lap. This little girl is not under anesthesia. She has simply been hypnotized. Hypnosis is the oldest technique used to modify human behavior. Under hypnosis, the subject is given a series of verbal instructions by another person, the hypnotizer. These instructions, called suggestions, enable the subject to reach a modified state of consciousness, the hypnotic state. This state can be used for all kinds of therapeutic interventions. We can get an idea of the hypnotic state by comparing it to the normal wakefulness and sleep states. When we are awake, we are constantly bombarded by stimuli from the external world. This information arouses all sorts of thoughts in us. If we want to, we can cut ourselves off from the flow of information. We simply reduce the light and sounds around us and stop all physical activity. These conditions are conducive to sleep, at which time our conscious thoughts are momentarily interrupted. However, a person under hypnosis is neither awake nor asleep. While being partially cut off from the outside world, the person remains conscious and in close contact with the hypnotizer. Freed from the usual inhibitions, the subject's mind can then devote itself to the pursuit of a specific goal, like recalling a past event or blocking off pain during an operation. In actual fact, the hypnotizer doesn't have any special powers. The success of the hypnosis does not depend on the hypnotizer. It depends solely on the person being hypnotized. But to be hypnotized, the subject must have a particular aptitude: hypnotic susceptibility. Out of 100 people chosen at random, 20 are not hypnotizable, 20 are highly hypnotizable, and the 60 others are so at varying degrees. After a series of tests, if the subject is proven hypnotizable, the induction of hypnosis can begin. First, the subject is comfortably settled. Speaking slowly, the hypnotizer suggests that the subject assume a relaxed position and stare at a fixed point in the visual field. The hypnotizer then asks the subject to put aside all current preoccupations and do nothing else but listen to what will be said without making any kind of effort. The hypnotizer carefully observes everything the subject feels, staying as close as possible to his experiences in his line of questioning. After a few minutes, the subject reaches a hypnotic state. He can then focus with extraordinary ease on any specific target. For instance, if he enjoys traveling, the hypnotizer can suggest that the subject is on a beach and not in the dentist's chair. A susceptible subject will be convinced that this is the case and will indeed feel neither fear nor pain. Scientists do not know exactly how the blocking of pain is achieved under hypnosis. However, they do know that during hypnosis, all brain activity is concentrated in the right hemisphere. It would appear that changes also occur in the relationships between the higher layers and the deeper zones of the brain. Hypnosis can also contribute to psychotherapy. Patients under hypnosis can become conscious of many memories or fantasies normally buried deep in their unconscious minds. They can thus relive emotions and traumas repressed since their childhood. Once the goals have been reached, the psychologist brings the subject out of the hypnotic state very quickly. The hypnotizer, for instance, asks the subject to wake up on the count of 5, telling him that he will remember everything that has happened. On the count of 5, the subject awakens and then gradually remembers everything that occurred. Hypnosis is also used as a remedial technique in the treatment of various physical symptoms as well as of psychological disorders. The therapeutic possibilities of this tool are just beginning to be explored. Rest assured that even in a hypnotic state, you could not be forced to perform acts that are morally repugnant to you. It's impossible. The will of the hypnotizer is not stronger than that of the hypnotized person. If a serious individual were to get down on all fours in front of a room full of people and start barking, it would be because somewhere deep in his unconscious mind, he is obeying a play impulse. In fact, hypnosis produces a state that makes it possible to break through a person's conscious defenses and converse directly with that person's unconscious mind. The development of the exact sciences has made us contemptuous of anything that is not material and objective, anything that went beyond the perception of our 5 senses. However, in recent years, scientists have begun questioning certain less empiric approaches, and they are realizing that they have nothing to do with magic or charlatanism. As a result, interest in the power of the imagery produced by the brain is ever growing. The human body and mind are closely linked. For several years, researchers have observed that by sheer willpower, we are able to control certain biological functions we thought were independent of our will, and hence cure ourselves of certain illnesses. In this hospital, patients suffering from physical diseases such as diabetes and cancer are meditating. They are experimenting with a new medical approach, self-help or self-healing. According to this approach, illness is brought on by a general imbalance of the system. While traditional medicine seeks to cure by eliminating the symptoms of an illness, self-healing attempts to redress the physical and emotional imbalance in the patient. To accomplish this, patients make an important contribution of their own in the work with their psychiatrists. They can employ various psychological methods like mental imagery. In this method, they try to associate a precise image with the symptoms of their illness. They then try to create a second image that will neutralize the first. Thanks to the self-help method, patients suffering from psoriasis, a skin ailment, have managed to alleviate the symptoms of their problems substantially in only a few months. One patient, a woman, pictured a shiny, warm cylinder emerging from her stomach and moving toward her head. When the imaginary cylinder reached her head, she felt her sensations change. After a few days, the seriousness of her symptoms had been reduced by half. This approach will probably not be able to cure a case as serious as generalized cancer, but at least it encourages patients to adopt a more positive attitude toward their illness and gives them some hope. In self-healing, the techniques used are secondary to the patient's attitude and confidence. But there are other methods that, by working psychologically, can control various bodily functions. Biofeedback is one such method. The principle of biofeedback is that a person receiving ongoing information about his physical functions can, through relaxation, succeed in modifying that function voluntarily. During a biofeedback session, the patient is connected to an electronic machine that measures continually one of his bodily functions. For example, the degree of tenseness of the muscles can be measured by 3 electrodes pasted on the forehead. The patient successively tenses and then relaxes his muscles. The information the machine receives is amplified and then converted into a visual signal, like the movement of a needle, and into a sound signal, like a click. Perceived by the patient, these signals enable him to achieve a higher degree of relaxation. One of the more interesting applications of biofeedback is the treatment of tension headaches or migraine headaches. Increasing numbers of scientists believe the migraine is caused by a disorder in cerebral circulation, which increases the flow of blood to the brain. There ensues a rise in head temperature, accompanied by generalized pain and even nausea and vomiting. During the treatment, the patient lies down comfortably. A thermal biofeedback device measures the temperature of the patient's fingers. By observing the machine, the patient learns to warm his limbs and cool down his head. After a few sessions, he is usually able to do this on his own, without the help of the machine or of the therapist. The patient is also able to significantly reduce the intensity, duration, and frequency of his migraine headaches. Biofeedback can have many other medical applications, such as the treatment of heartbeat irregularities. Increasingly, scientists are discovering how closely the mind and the body are connected. But increasingly, charlatans take advantage of people's gullibility by attributing all sorts of abilities to the mind: healing, wealth, and power. The power of the mind is indeed great, but it does have its limits, and we still have some way to go before we have mastered that power. They say some yogis are able to accelerate their heart rates by 80 or 100 beats per minute, or increase their body temperature at will. Impressive, isn't it? But for them, it's the spiritual aspect that counts, much more than the feats themselves. On the other hand, there are some who have dreamt up ways to exploit the power of the mind over the body for more, say, lucrative reasons. Subliminal seduction has become legend. It is the modern version of seduction. Some hard rock groups are said to have inserted subliminal messages into their music, urging listeners to rebel, take drugs, and even commit suicide. None of that has ever been proven. Scientists believe that subliminal messages, whether visual or auditory, can be perceived. Their impact on people depends on their degree of relaxation, their physiological threshold of perception, and also on the nature of the message itself. It seems that the word prostitute, for instance, is much more difficult to perceive than the word chair. Messages hidden in the soundtrack of a film, suggesting that spectators buy goodies during the intermission. The word sex hidden in a commercial for an alcoholic drink. Subliminal publicity did have its moment of glory. However, there is little stock put into that form of advertising anymore. Indeed, none of the scientific studies conducted to date has ever proven that subliminal signals affect our consumer habits in any way. And yet, subliminal perception still raises controversy. While some researchers refute the effects of subliminal perception, others maintain they are capable of influencing our subconscious and altering some of our behavioral patterns. In order to be perceived consciously, a signal must first stimulate the receptor cells of our sensory organs. A picture, for instance, stimulates the sensitive cells of the retina of the eye. The stimulus travels through the optic nerve to the visual cortex, located at the back of the brain. That's when we become aware of the image captured on the retina. However, when a signal is reduced below a certain level, it is no longer perceived consciously and becomes subliminal. The stimulation caused by such a picture can reach the brain, but it is so feeble that it disappears before it reaches the cerebral cortex. Our consciousness then ignores its existence. Research has demonstrated that some subliminal messages can be perceived. In such experiments, the name of a color, then a rectangle of color, are projected on a screen, subliminally before the subject. It takes the subject twice as long to identify the color if the word doesn't match the colored rectangle than if it does. But believers in subliminal perception go even further. They affirm that such signals are perceived by our unconscious mind and can influence our behavior much more effectively than messages that are really perceptible. For example, according to subliminal enthusiasts, subliminal messages are conducive to relaxation. Some radio stations broadcast music containing imperceptible suggestions to relax. Motor vehicle drivers are forewarned against possible unpredictable effects the music might have on them. In spite of the popularity of such techniques, the hypothesis that subliminal perception can alter our behavior remains a subject of controversy. In one experiment, the state of relaxation was observed between two groups. one listening to subliminal music and the other listening to the same music but without the subliminal messages. Their degrees of relaxation were assessed by measuring the electric conductivity of their skin using a polygraph. The result? After half an hour, the subjects listening to non-subliminal music were just as relaxed as those listening to the subliminal music. Nonetheless, some psychiatrists believe that subliminal messages could be put to good use in some forms of psychotherapy. They could be beneficial in the treatment of disorders of the libido by stimulating the creation of mental imagery in patients. Most scientists concur that subliminal messages can reach our unconscious mind and affect our behavior. However, the effects, if they do exist, would remain very subtle indeed. Our brain certainly possesses unknown powers, but in order to gain access to them, we must first consent to the test, and then put ourselves into a state of great receptiveness of mind.